government. Well, whoop-de-doo.
Yeah.
Because when you take and you let the Federal Reserve give $7 trillion out of the discount window in 2009 to the European banks to keep the banks from going under, guess what? At 0% interest, that's our tax money. $7 trillion going to the Europeans. And then you've got the Federal Reserve spending money on these foreign mortgages that are underwater and derivatives. $273 trillion of derivatives. But the major thing is, we ought to get out of these 730 military bases around the world. We have got to reject this military-industrial complex ideology that's going to bankrupt us like it did in Persia, in Greece, in France, in Germany. I mean, how many times does this have to happen before people will wake up and say, you cannot dominate the world militarily? We're supposed to be a country where we take care of, we promote the general welfare, not the general's welfare, the general welfare we're supposed to promote.
Thank you. Let me tell you, I want this is all about Social Security and Medicare, but you brought up the subject, okay? So let me respond, okay? I think you are spot on. You are spot on. I have studied these trade agreements. I have been an international trader. I know factually what happened as a result of the North American Free Trade Agreement. 57,000 American manufacturing operations moved overseas, and with them went millions of jobs, and that's why I opposed it. We have the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement now. I've studied it, I've read it in detail, and once again, you're going to see more and more manufacturing operations and jobs going overseas under that. And that's not to mention the new manufacturing jobs and businesses that would have been created had we not entered into those agreements. And here's what happened. I talked about it in the, that's why I opposed this agreement. And here's what happened. Once again, we talked about, you know, how we've extended life and longevity. I'm a business guy. My kids have taken over my sawmill and my pallet factory. The American business is paying their share of Social Security and Medicare and workers' comp and unemployment comp, and complying with EPA, complying with OSHA, complying with consumer protection, trying as best they can to pay living wages. Well, that all costs money. And what these agreements say is go and compete with people that don't have to do any of that. Well, that doesn't work unless you want to be like Vietnam, where they pay people 60 cents an hour, and they go to China, you can't step outside and breathe the air. It's so polluted. So that's what the gentleman is 100% right. Now, I also have my own little export trading company, okay? And I've done a little business all over the globe. So I know what this trade business is all about. People ask me what I sold. I just sold U.S. goods. But I tell people I sold everything except for guns and arms, which is, and drugs, which is where all the real money was. But I've lived in the Middle East. I've studied the language. I lived there when they were friendly toward us. Didn't necessarily agree with everything we did, but you know, they were okay with it. I wouldn't go there today. I wouldn't go there today. And I'll tell you what, in that Middle East, from one of the things, a number of the things I learned, one is nothing is never as it appears. Never as it appears. You saw where we spent $1 billion on equip and train of the so-called friendly Free Syrian rebels. And we trained 5 guys. Really? $1.2 billion. And you train 5 guys. I don't care if you think that's a good idea. I don't know of anyone who thinks it's a good idea to spend $1.2 billion training 5 guys. But what they don't like to tell you, we actually trained a lot more guys. They took our money, our training, our guns, and our arms, and they're fighting against us. I don't like to tell you about that part of it. Right. And to the point that you made, and just Iraq alone, we spent $3 trillion. Think about that. $3 trillion. For one of those trillion, we could have graduated every kid in America from college debt free. For another one of those trillion, we could have built our roads, our bridges. For crying out loud, the trains are coming off the tracks, the bridges are falling down. The wastewater treatment systems are polluting and with toxic substances, you know, our children. And we could have rebuilt that, putting a lot of people to work in good paying jobs and continuing and paying forward. And we could have taken another one of those 3 trillion, given everybody $1 trillion tax break. So I tell people, I'm passionately with you, and thank you for your passion. There's never been a country in the history of the world that built its leadership and its prowess and its future on military domination and policing of the world. Every single one of them has collapsed. Why? Because things start falling apart at home. And even if you think it's a good idea, you got to think about it. We all have a lot of good ideas we'd like to put our money and our investment. We can't afford everything. And this is just, and that's just one country.
But what is the definition of an entitlement? Something that you have a right to receive, not something that the fascists think you have a right to give up.
Yeah. No,
something you have a right to receive.
We're in agreement. So, and we just simply have to turn this thing around. And I have been one of the leaders, and I feel strongly and passionately about it as you do, because I think our survival depends on it. And by the way, with regard to Iraq alone, I said 3 trillion. I wasn't giving you the total cost, because the brave young men and women, you know, who went over there and they served, many of them came back badly damaged. They suffered brain injuries, they lost arms, they lost legs, they experienced the trauma of war, and we've got a $2 trillion bill going forward taking care of them.
And where was it budgeted?
And by God, we're obligated to it, and we damn well better pay it.
Where's the bill? Where was the bill budgeted from? There was no budget made for that. It was taken out of the trust fund, and IOUs were put in the trust fund.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right.
Congressman, we got a question over there that's...
Yes, sir.
Yes, I got a couple things. First of all, I'd like to commend you for what I believe that you are honestly trying to improve and help the Social Security program. Thank you. As the officer over here said, we don't trust the insurance companies, but our government is being trusted by few and few people also. So, you know, how good will they be at handling our money, my money? A couple of things.
Fair question.
What is the HR 1314 bill?
You know, we have so many thousands of them.
It's
Can you give me
supposed
a
to
clue?
be, it's a hidden, it says Congress has hidden a seemingly innocent piece of legislation labeled the HR 1314, a radical reform that threatens the financial security of as many as 21.3 million Americans.
You know, I'll look in. Who's the sponsor of it?
I don't know.
You know what it is, buddy? You know, I apologize. We have just so many thousands of
It
bills.
says it's already been enacted. It goes into effect May 1st. It has something to do with Social Security benefits.
Right.
Yeah. HR.
We'll take a look at it. Get his name and
Okay. Another couple things. I know that most politicians don't have to worry about Social Security because they've got their own programs. And as the exchange between President Obama and Senator McCain during that healthcare summit, where Senator McCain reminded President Obama that, remember President Obama, during our campaign, we promised that all Americans would have the same health insurance as we do in Washington. President Obama turned to Senator McCain and said, Senator McCain, the campaign is over. That was done. Okay. The other thing, now, I don't have a retirement. My wife and I live on Social Security, a bare minimum, okay? Now, a few years ago, I called the Social Security office, asked them if we were getting a cost of living increase. They said, I said, because the price of gas was almost $4 a gallon, food prices go up, they said, no, we don't calculate the cost of living on food and gas prices. Last year I called them up and asked them if we were getting a increase for 2016. They told me, no, the price of food is stable and the gasoline prices are down. So I said, where do you get your figures from? Ethiopia or Somalia?
Well, you raised a couple of good questions, and one is, you know, can we trust the government?
No.
My answer to that is no. Don't ever trust the government, all right? When they say I'm here for the government, I'm here to help you, run like the wind. So that is true, okay? So it requires a constant vigilance. Our founders said that. Thomas Jefferson.
Give
you
up a
know?
little liberty for a little freedom?
Yeah.
You get neither and lose both.
Exactly. Having said that, that doesn't mean the government can't do some good things. I mean, Social Security lifted more people out of poverty than anything in the history of the world, maybe. And Medicare extended life for more people, more in the history of the world. So it can do some good things, but don't take it for granted. Don't trust it. You got to be on top of it all the time. Secondly, process matters. And I'll give you an example. I served in the legislature and the Congress back in the 70s, and then I spent 32 years in business. But back then, the process was what they called regular order, meaning that everything came up under an open rule. Meaning it came up through the committee under an open rule, came before the House and the Senate under an open rule. And what does that mean? Anybody that had a good idea could offer an amendment and have their idea argued, debated, considered, and voted on. When I got back there here 3 years ago, I was like, what the hell happened to American democracy? Back to your original question. You know, you can't trust the government. Everything's coming up under a closed rule. Well, what the hell? I didn't come out here to be a photo op, you know, for the decisions that are being made in the Speaker's office. If we're going to write a transportation bill, how about letting the Transportation Committee write it? You know? If you're going to write an education bill, how about letting if you're going to write something on Social Security or Medicare changes and reforms, how about letting the committee consider it? And they haven't been doing that.
Yep.
So it's a process, you know. And I will say this, you know, Speaker Ryan, Republican, he said he's committed to open to regular order in an open rule, and I applaud that. And he seems to be delivering. He let us do a transportation bill. We got more done in the last month with Ryan than we have in the last 5 years. That's the truth.
Yep.
We got a transportation reform, we got an education reform, we got an intelligence reform, we got a budget, we got an appropriation bill, we got a number of things. So process is important. And that gets back to Medicare and Social Security. And having it in a format that's not driven by profit, okay? Having it in a format that is administratively efficient is, in my judgment, the best way to do it. So I'm not sure I carried that point earlier all the way home. If everybody here has a different policy, which they do throughout America, unlike the rest of the world, they say that 30%, 30% of all of our medical dollars go into administration. Because you're having to administer, you know, 300 million different policies. Well, what's the logic of that? I don't care if you like government or business or neither one of them. That doesn't make... So that process, by turning that into like a single payer system, can save a lot of money. And that's why, you know, I think, you know, smarter, you know, doctors and people, you know, from both sides of the aisle, from Donald Trump to Bernie Sanders, are saying, hey, that's the way we got to go. And then to your last point, that I think about this. You know, the first person I ever heard remind me of this was, or alerted to me, was Rudy Perpich. God bless Rudy. I thought he was a great governor. You know. But Rudy said, you know, I don't know if you thought about it, but, you know, the president, the vice president, the cabinet, they all got socialized medicine. Have you ever heard any of them complain about it? The admirals, the generals, they all got socialized medicine. Have you ever heard any of them complain about it? The members of the Congress of the United States, we have a nice little socialized medical clinic down around the corner, down the hallway where it's not too visible to the public. Have you ever heard one of them complain about it? I never have. And I've seen some of these yahoos on the floor of the House. When I go to the doctor, I want to know he's working for me and not for the federal government. And then they sneak out and go see their government doctor.
Two more points.
There's a little hypocrisy going on here.
2 more points. Excuse
Yeah.
me for interrupting. Number one, when we did get a $30 a month raise for Social Security, my Medicare supplement Part B went up $30 a month. The other thing is that with regard to the gentleman back there talking about these expenditures, I know that President Johnson and probably others took out money to fund from Social Security to fund the Vietnam War. Has that money been paid back to Social Security?
Well, you know,
No, the conflict, the police action, right?
Two things on this one. One is, you want the money to be somewhere where it's earning some income, okay? The stock market's a dangerous place, you know? If we'd had it in there in '08, we'd have lost, you know, millions and millions of dollars, okay? I think the Central States Pension Fund, you know, lost $9 billion, you know, in a few months there. So, what have they done with it? They've invested it in U.S. Treasury notes. Now, is that a good investment? I happen to think it is, and here's why. It's never in its entire history failed to yield a profit. It's never in our history failed to honor a payout or an obligation. So if you're going to invest the money somewhere, you know, that's the place to invest it. What is wrong is that this gentleman pointed out, and this gentleman pointed out, is to take that money and use it to pay for wars in Vietnam, and wars in Iraq, and wars in Afghanistan, and wars in Somalia, and wars in Yemen, and wars in Syria. You know, there's a new movie come out, you know, who are we going to go to war with next? You know, at some point someone's got to stand up and question this, you know, the affordability of it and the desirability. So there is a way to invest this money that, at least for, you know, the history of these programs, has always yielded and delivered on its income. Will it in the future? It's a good question. I will tell you this. Government treasury notes and securities are the best investment in the world. The Chinese buy those notes, the Japanese buy those notes, the Arabs buy those notes, the Europeans buy those notes, because they are the best investment in the world. And if the day comes when the government of the United States, because they got so carried away trying to rebuild the rest of the world and forgot to take care of itself, and those notes are no good, we got even bigger problems.
Treasury notes.
Congressman, probably have time for one more.
Treasury notes, the last time I saw, Treasury notes are an instrument